Hi there, my name's Nick Francis. I'm a Chief Technology and Marketing Officer for Brooklyn Vendor Assurance, and I'm also a Board Advisor for the Vendor Ops community. Today I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking to you about what to consider when creating your supplier management operating model.
Vendor Ops, leveling up your vendor management.
In other video clips, we spoke about the need of why you might want to create a new strategy in the supplier management space, and there were 6 reasons for that. And also there was another one talking about the vision that you might want to put forward. What is your mission statement effectively for the function? So once you've got through the parts of why you might want to consider a supplier management strategy and building a supplier management office, and then you are clear on your mission or your statement as to what you expect and the outcomes for that group to come together and become a reality. When you're going creating this function, what are the areas that I would suggest that you consider each time to make sure the function's well considered and thought after and is clear on what it needs to do? And one of the first ones is, not surprisingly, about the people. So what's the organisational structure you expect to put in place for these group of individuals? And that can be a centralised model. So you look at the resources you've got and you've got to put them into a centralised team, all aligned under a single area or single manager that's expected to do the work that's brought to them by all the different business units or project groups, etc. Or you can go completely the other way, which is a decentralised model, which is a matrix management function, which is loosely joined together through common process and policies, but they operate within their own BUs, business units, or they operate within their own projects. They just commit to doing things in a similar way each time after time in the same fashion to get a consistent outcome. Or my personal favourite, you go with a hybrid model, which is you've got a centre of excellence that's responsible for designing the lean, they're responsible for designing the organisation construct, the processes, etc., responsible for everything, and then cascading and communicating that out with the matrix managed elements embedded within each team and BU to consider what needs to be done from a discipline perspective. So once you've got that organisational structure ready, you then have to look at the capabilities that are needed. Now, it can all be a team of similar level of capability, or you can get more senior roles, sort of a lead position, a manager, and more junior to offer an element of career progression and promotion, depending on the size and scale. But essentially consider all the capabilities and write the job descriptions effectively that you'd need to sit within the function. Once you're through doing that, you've got to look at how the function's going to governance itself. So how's it going to make effective decisions? What are the terms of references written around the steer codes and the meetings that they hold and the policies and procedures that run those meetings and those steer codes and help get to an effective outcome or effective decision making, as it says here. And then how at a macro level you would police that from a performance and dashboards perspective. So what are the KPIs that indicate good governance for the function? Third and foremost is what risks does either having or not having a function like this introduce to the business? And then looking at the controls that would help control those risks to make sure they don't crystallise. Fourth is performance KPIs and dashboards. So what's the framework in this case that you'd manage suppliers against? So that can be performance in a contractual sense, financial sense, a compliance sense. What are the categories and groupings that you want to measure a supplier against? And then how are they standing up to each of those categories by an informed set of checkpoints that underpin those categories, and that the frequency of which you do that assurance is down to you and dependent on the resource you've got and how many suppliers you have, and then bringing them together in some kind of management level dashboard to communicate back to seniors how the suppliers in that organisation are being measured and performing over an extended period of time. You need to consider the data that you are processing, the data that you are holding. So from an information and data perspective, when the processes are being used and the performance management frameworks are operating, what data do you need to hold and where is that? And is that suitably held and suitably stored against your information management policies and your security policies across your organisation? Sixth is the IT applications and infrastructure. So to run said operating model and team of individuals, what platforms are you going to need? What tools do you have at your disposal? How are you going to use them consistently? Especially where you've got either matrix managed or hybrid teams where it's not all just a centered single few that run the processes, especially where you've got either different time zones, different offices, different geographies considered. You want to be using some kind of platform and tooling to keep your data all aligned and centered and all together, irrespective of where those people are that are using it or operating from. Financial and fiscal. So what's the budget and the monetary structures that are going to sustain this team? What budget do they manage and operate to? How much money do they spend each year? What do they cost? What's that over an extended period of time? So week to month or then month to year? How are they showing value for money? How are they spending all that money and how does that break down? Just typical financial management of an organisation and a team. And finally, the processes. So a key one in my mind, we spoke about processes earlier, but in the governance sense, the governance process, this is more around what processes does this organisation use? So how do they segment vendors? How do they performance manage vendors? How frequently do they meet and conduct reviews with vendors? What is a contractual compliance process? What happens when there's an issue or a dispute? What's the process that happens there? All of those things need to be thought about and at least documented at a high level, if not a low level of detail, that can be shared amongst the teams or the team using the technology that was outlined in point 6 to ensure that those processes are being operated in the right manner, reported on in the right manner, and then consistently and continually enhanced in the right manner as well. So what's that approach for continuous improvement? And then it goes full circle, and the reason it's a circle because it links back to the people again. So the people operate the processes, the governance, etc., and that's why they were number one. The difference in the colours here is essentially you've got business architecture. So the blue is business architecture, or you've got in the darker colour IT architecture. And that together is traditionally what's known as your enterprise architecture. So this is your enterprise architecture for a effective supplier management function. Thanks for listening to me. As I said, these are the things that I would consider once I've got a handle on my vision and strategy from a supplier management function perspective. These are the 8 areas I'd go through to consider the team that I'm building or the function that I'm operating within and the strategy that underpins that. Hope that was useful. Thank you.
To keep up with the latest Vendor Ops news, subscribe here and follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Links in the description below.